Today we are going to talk about adding and subtracting decimals. When we add and subtract decimals, we follow the same rules. The most important piece to this is that we line up our decimals. So we're not so worried about lining up the numbers themselves as we are as paying attention to where the decimal is and making sure that decimal is in line. So if we have 7 and 3/10 plus 7 and 26 hundredths, we want to start by writing 7 and 3/10. Noting where my decimal is, it needs to stay in the same spot between that 7 and that 3. Now I take 7 and 26 hundredths, and again, I place that decimal so it should be in line. The 7 is before your decimal, whereas the 26 is after. Now, notice this looks a little bit different than an addition problem where we are adding whole numbers. Typically, we want the numbers all as far to the right as possible. Here, we want our decimals to be in line. We are going to add our hundredths placed together, our tenths placed together, our ones placed together, and so on and so forth. Now, sometimes students find it helpful to place a 0 here. We know that everything after that decimal, after the digits that we see, there are zeros. So there are zeros here as well. So sometimes placing that 0 there helps as a visual reminder that we are adding 6 to 0. We don't want to add 6 and 3 on accident. Okay, so we just keep that. And then we add like normal. So we've lined up our decimals. We have 7 and 3/10 plus 7 and 26 hundredths. Our decimals are in line. Now I take that decimal before I even add and drop it in my sum. All 3 decimals should be in a perfect line. Once I have my add-ins with my decimals in line and my sum, my answer to my addition problem with the decimal in line, I just add like regular. And this will be the same for subtraction. I just add like regular. 0 plus 6 is 6. 3 plus 2 is 5. 7 plus 7 is 14. And that's that. My sum is 14 and 56 hundredths. So again, to review, we add almost the exact same way. We just need to make sure that our decimals are in fact in line. How would I set up this second problem? 15 and 8 hundredths minus 3 and 7/10. Well, I would go ahead and write my 15 and 8 hundredths first. That's my first number. That goes on top. Subtracting. That decimal has to stay in line. 3 is in the ones place directly before that decimal point, and 7 is directly after. Now, the only place we can add in those extra zeros are after or before. We can't squeeze in a 0 here. Okay, that 7 is in the 10th spot, so it needs to be in line with the 0 because the 0 is also in the 10th spot. Now, sometimes, like I said, it is easier to go ahead and add in that 0 here to remind us that we have to stay in line. Now I finished step number 1. I've lined up my decimals in my problem. Now I need to drop my decimal in the difference in my answer. From here, I just subtract like I normally would. I can ignore the decimals now and just subtract in line. 8 minus 0 is 8. 0 minus 7 I cannot do, so I go ahead and regroup a little bit here. I take a 1 from the 5 and go ahead and place it here. 10 minus 7 leaves me with 3. Now I've got 4 minus 3, which is 1, and 1 minus 0 is 1. So our difference, the answer to our subtraction problem, is 11 and 38 hundredths. I didn't mean that there. So again, you line up your decimals in the problem and in the answer. Make sure your numbers fall correctly, they should match your problem, and then you subtract or add like normal.